Right, Mr. Benchwork here. We're at it again with the big O gauge layout that I'm working on. This is a major redesign. There was a bunch of things we had to adjust. And basically, what it comes down to is there was a little bit of miscommunication and some changes in design over the roughly 1 year we've been discussing this project. So, where we're going to start here is first things first, is we have to actually adjust this edge of the benchwork in. Originally, it was all the way down here, so there was a 24-inch wide walkway. And unbeknownst to me, this little jog in the wall over here is actually the entrance to the garage. So it was pretty important to maintain at least a 36-inch walkway here. So we had to push things up. It was pretty easy. We just changed the angle of this bridge and of this curved track here, pushed it up a little bit, and then did a couple of little things. He did request that the siding for the lumber build be a pass-through siding, so I did go ahead and change that. So other things you'll notice immediately is instead of 2 yards, there's only 1 yard. And actually might be helpful if I open up the old plan. So let me open that up real quick. There we go. All right, so let's go down to 10%. There we go. So again, you see on the original plan, I had roughly that 2-foot gap, and then you see that pink line here. That is where I had to move it to. So you can see here's the before, and then here's the after. So I'm going to go back to 10% here, so we're sameys. All right, so another thing we needed to do is I needed to add some more tracks into the yard, and then I actually needed to make sure that there was a dedicated pass-through siding for the passenger train. The yard was, or the train station was originally on the back side, and it got moved to the front side. And one of the reasons we were able to do that is because this door, which is signified in red here, was actually moved. You'll see that it shifted over about 24 inches. So we were able to account for that. So I do have the yard switcher tracks on both sides. So I've got one here and one on the other side. I do have a runaround siding, so you can do some switching and build and break trains as desired. I also have a added track down here on the bottom, signified in yellow, and that's going to be a caboose track or a spat to park an extra locomotive or two. The more significant changes are going to be along here on this right-hand side. So instead of having a yard up in the top here like we did on the original plan, we got rid of the yard in favor of just a 2-track main line with a pass-through siding that goes to some added industry buildings over here. This tan color is actually going to be for grain and or fruit. We're trying to model a specific area of the country. So coming down, we've got the main line and what is effectively the arrival departure track for the yard, which is going to be this area here. That comes down into a Y section, so we can actually turn trains around here again. And then we actually have a loop going around the grain and fruit processing. He'll probably have some other industries here, so I kept it pretty simple. Just, here's where you can put buildings. Now, for the client in particular, everything on this layout is 072 and larger, except for this return loop right here on this bottom side. I want to zoom in a little bit so you can see a little better here. All right, so except for this highlighted area, everything on the layout is 072. Now, I did go through and make sure that this was set up, so if you wanted to make sure that this was 072 as well, you could. However, it does turn it into a circle. There is no more room in this area to grow this, to give it more room, to give it a squared up area for to spot a boxcar or something like that. There's just nowhere I can grow this in any direction, really. I could grow it over here just a little bit, but it's not going to help as much as you might think. So anyway, so this is 054 between this area and this area, but otherwise everything on the layout is 072 or larger. So coming down from the bottom right here, again, we've got our main line, which is going to be here. And then we've got our arrival departure track for the main yard. And this comes into the Helix. Now, the grade on the Helix does actually start up here. And it starts coming down a little bit. So there will be a little bit of wonkiness to this area. Obviously, we'll keep it as flat as we possibly can, but there will be a difference in grade of probably 1 to 2 inches between that area and the bottom of this switch here. So there will be a little bit of grade. Thankfully, with the Y, we can also deflect that down and then keep this area between here and here, keep that all relatively flat. Okay, so going through the Helix, we'll go into the lower area. Up here, I did go ahead and change it to Johnson City from Johnsonville. That was a mistake on my part. My apologies. I also did pull the top benchwork back, so more of the bottom benchwork is exposed as requested. So again, here's what it looked like on the old plan. So it was all covered up, and it was all industry over here, and the new plan is all exposed. The left-hand side of the plan, other than creating this pass-through siding for the lumber mill and transport area, is basically the same. Obviously, I tweaked some things, moved some things around a little bit, just to make sure I had the room I needed, and adjusted things as desired, but everything's pretty much the same otherwise. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down a little bit, and I'm going to start turning off the upper layers so we can see what the bottom looks like. So let's see. Let's turn off descriptions, special areas, turn off the backdrop. Oh, backdrop is actually something I should probably cover. So on the old plan, the backdrop wrapped around. It basically divided the layout in half. So it divided the layout in half. On the new plan, this red area down here is the only area of backdrop on the entire layout. And that's primarily because I needed something to back up this bridge area and something to visually separate it from the Keddy Y, which is going to be on the backside. It's also going to be a little bit challenging to make sure that I have the clearance I need for visuals on the lower area where the Keddy Y is. So I'm going to have to be a little creative with how I do the supports for the upper deck where this bridge is. More on that later, but basically, like again, I've only got the backdrop between here and here, so it's only about 12 feet of backdrop on the whole layout, which is going to allow you to stand over here and control the entire yard from one control panel, which is your plans. All right, so continuing on, I'm going to go ahead and just continue to turn off layers. And then here we go. All right, so let's go back down to 10%. So this is the lower level. So this is entirely separate from the upper deck. I did go ahead and visualize where the supports are going to be on this for this time. So I've got this all signified in dark gray. This is where the supports from the lower benchwork are going to rise up to attach to the upper benchwork. And it's basically going to be the pseudo backdrop for the lower layer as well. Now, you've got a lot of mountains in here, so I'm not going to worry about curving the backdrop on these back corners because it's all going to get filled in with mountain anyway, so you're not going to see it. So there's effectively not a whole lot of changes down here. You had requested mostly a scenic area, so I've got the Keddy Y here. and that rolls around. It does go through a tunnel to add some visual interest. We've got the river passing through, and that goes right past the gold mine as requested. I do have the long siding here, so you can potentially pull off a freight train off of the main line and still get the passenger train to go past it. So this siding is going to be, see how long it is. Oh, we'll have to do it the hard way, unfortunately. All right, so that looks like it's 120 inches or about 10 feet. So that should be plenty long for the short freight train that you were talking about. So, and then after the gold mine area, there's another tunnel. Again, it's mostly for visual interest. We don't have to actually install that, or we can install it elsewhere. I just put them in there just as a way to change it up a little bit. So this comes down and then starts going into the Helix. So starting about here and then going through the Helix, we're going up at about 2% all the way through. You'll notice that the tracks actually do not overlap themselves. The reason for this is so if I do need to adjust the grade up or down a little bit, I do have that wiggle room. I don't have to worry about clearance issues with a train passing directly underneath another track. So, and then once it gets up to the top of the Helix, it pops out. In this case, it's going to pop out underneath that road. Let's see if I can turn that back on. So it'll pop out underneath the road. And then it may or may not end up leading over a bridge over here. Let me see if I can turn on the grade track. There we go. So may not end up putting another bridge right here on part of this Y section. That's up to you. So we could either leave that track exposed or leave it hidden as part of the Helix. But in any case, I wanted to have some kind of a transition point, kind of hide the track coming out of the Helix, because this area here on top of the Helix is going to be a little more flat. So it just makes the transition a little easier. So that said, this is the adjusted plan. I hope you like. We'll obviously continue to adjust things as needed, and we'll go from there. But it's this is the second revision. We'll most likely have a third one. It's going to probably have some minor changes. I may or may not cover that in video. We'll see what happens. But in either event, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next video. Hopefully it will be a build video because I'm kind of getting excited about that. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.